So, welcome back after 2 weeks. We couldn't post last week because of the massive blackout that we had in Venezuela, but we're back.
Yes, we're going to talk about the blackout, and we also have a very special guest.
So, welcome back.
Welcome back after 2 weeks now.
Yeah, I missed you guys.
Well,
What happened?
I tried to call you last Thursday, no, the Thursday before, and no electricity at all.
We had everything set up to do the podcast, but the massive blackout that wiped out most of Venezuela or all of Venezuela at one point and left some people with more than 100 hours without any electricity and now without any running water.
Well, we have been like this situation like 20 years ago, well, since 20 years ago. And we never know how it can be worse and worse every day. Every time it happens, the food, we lost a lot of food. The water, the water doesn't work at all. The connection to internet, the traffic lights, the traffic, the electricity, the gas stations. There was a mess.
Yeah, a lot of people outside of Venezuela cannot even fathom what it would be like to go without electricity 1 or 2 days. Imagine 4, 5, 6. There's still people today that are without electricity after the blackout last Thursday.
And the psychological effects. This morning we had this short of electricity here and in my house, and then you say, well, again, and you don't know if it's going to be only for 10 minutes or it could be several hours or days.
So obviously this blackout has affected everything dealing with news up to today. We have a UN committee that's here in Venezuela investigating, doing some research. We've had some people denouncing that hospitals are being, made better, trying to improve it for this inspection. So we have a lot of news to cover this show.
Well, a lot of them. Well, let's continue with one of the items you want to talk about. Which one?
Well, there's a lot of the blackout, how it affected people. We have also to talk about the journalists and freedom of speech that's being repressed in this country at this moment. And especially because we had an important figure of press, which is Luis Carlos Diaz, that was detained for a day. And it was just a day, and I think it was because of the pressure of the UN committee
international pressure,
national pressure too, because people went out and protested. I think that protest was even more successful than the one that Guaidó called for that day.
I want to mark very important with this lack of electricity, the death of people in hospitals. So. The kids, people that needs the dialysis and all these treatments, they were, running out of the treatment. And this comes in a moment that the UN Office for the Human Rights, they want to, make an opinion on Venezuela. And at the same time, what's going on is that they directed these visits to hospitals, and all of a sudden, all those hospitals, they were renewed and painted and all, And important, the civil society went out to the streets and told these visitors, so see, this is what is going on, not what you're going to see with this guide tour to these hospitals. So
I think it's a testament to Venezuelans that after all these years, citizens are not afraid to go out and protest and say, this is not the truth. This is not what's happening. This is not North Korea, for example, that when outside inspection comes in, they go through a tour of, very pretty areas of North Korea and people, obliged to that. Here, it doesn't happen like that.
And
that
lead us to the other subject we want to talk about. How do you promote and make visible those situations? Because public television or private but under licensed television in Venezuela, it doesn't show anything what's going on. So the mean that the people have are social medias, internet. And it's only blocked.
Not only television, but radio. During these days of blackout, the only information that people had was radio because they could go on their cars and turn on the radio. Some radios had an electric plant. Most of them were for national or government radio, and they did not inform anything of what was going on or if they were fixing anything or how long this blackout was going to last. Nothing. And what we learned from this blackout is that the government will use anything that happens against it to incriminate their opposition. And that's why,
or the United States,
because what was
did you listen that
the government's explanation? Okay. Do you remember?
Well, I remember, sadly remember. I mean, it was weird. I don't know if they have it translated into English.
Because there's several explanations. They're blaming the U.S. of sabotage. Some people in the government have made reference to how it's similar to Die Hard movies.
Oh, they use an application to turn off the
electricity. So it's laughable.
Well,
and it's unbelievable.
Oscar, I know someone that can talk to us, really detailing figures about the blockage and how this limitation of internet and how can another violation of human rights of freedom of speech. We have a very special guest here. We have Andres Azpurua.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Welcome. Well, we know each other.
Yeah.
So
first time on the show, first time in English speaking podcast also.
Yeah. First speaking English podcast in Venezuela. Came out of a whim, and we're trying to make it happen.
Nice.
Well, but it's difficult to make it happen because of the internet in Venezuela. What can you tell us about how the internet is responsive here in this country?
Well, the internet is almost critical situation every single day. It's not very stable. It's always at risk of being either censored or inaccessible just because of failures of different kinds. And the internet, the communications infrastructure that underpins the internet in Venezuela is always underfunded, undermaintained, and underdeveloped. So it's always a huge challenge. So it's a huge effort to put content on the internet like what you guys are doing, because it's really hard to maintain and keep stable connections to work stuff like this. And if we wanted to share this live, it would be extremely difficult. It's already really difficult to share this online.
It is impossible. We've tried it. We have tried. We have planned it, but it's impossible to do it. You're mentioning about censorship and also blocking.
Yeah.
Can you more or less explain the difference between blocking internet or the content of internet or the access and also the censorship, or how can it be, understood?
So the Venezuelan internet is heavily censored. We have many kinds of censorship currently working in Venezuela on the internet. So when we say censorship, is anything that limits your freedom of speech or your freedom of access to information on the internet. There are many ways this is done. So some of those ways is blocking, which is technical means that impedes you to actually get what you want to do on the internet. So if you want to visit a website, if that website is unreachable through technical means so that you don't reach the actual content that's there, that's a way of censorship. But there's other ways of censorship. For example, if you are afraid of getting into trouble because of what you say online, even though it might be completely lawful to say it, then that way you're self-censoring yourself, and that's another way of censorship, because you are not saying what you really want to do because of consequences that you might have. And that goes to radio, which is like one of the few ways that people actually got to see what was going on. Radio is heavily censored, and especially in the last few months, it's been very, very heavily censored and observed by the telco regulator that there are even keywords that they can't say. If they do say it, they get into huge trouble, and they probably risk losing their license. And without broadcast licenses, I mean, not only the business, but actually the information that they're providing to the communities is also lost. So they have to walk a very thin line. And on the internet, it's pretty much the same thing, with the addition that they can basically block anything they want. And the internet in Venezuela is suffering of internet blocks on every major ISP.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of that, especially recently. And I want to extend your introduction because Andres Azpurua is an activist for freedom of internet rights. What else are you doing in Venezuela right now?
So what we're doing right now mostly works around documenting technically what's going on with internet censorship. So we can actually say with like technical evidence at hand, how many websites are being blocked, and more than how many, how they're blocking it, and who is blocking it. So that way we can tell you that all major ISPs are blocking important Venezuelan streaming media. In Venezuela, as we don't have access to really free and independent over-the-air TV, then streaming media over the internet, which is really hard to produce locally, is the very seldom window to live content, especially about protests or speeches and so on. So sites like vivoplay.net, bpitv.net, evtvmiami.com.
All information sites.
Yeah, they're all information sites. They're like basically TV over the internet, basically for news, because they know there's a huge niche there of people hungry for live news, which are impossible to find at the moment in Venezuela. And those sites are all blocked, for example.
And as somebody that's monitoring all this, how believable is the government's assessment of cyber attacks to the power grids in Venezuela? So, is that credible?
So it's really hard to say. I mean, I'm not an expert on the actual control systems of either production facilities like the Guri Dam, which is the hydroelectric dam, or the power distribution systems, which are also highly complex and require control systems. Some parts are probably mechanic, electromechanic, and some parts are more digital or more like computer controlled. Either way, I mean, it's a possibility, but it's hard to believe that as the most likely scenario. If you have a government that's saying, "Hey, we've been attacked by this kind of cyber criminals or cyber attacks, either by state actors or non-state actors," you would have technical evidence showing it, because it's a very like high level of accusation to say that.
Yes, but we're used to all this kind of claims they do, and also we're more than witnesses. We are victims of the destroying of the country. I mean, we know there is no maintenance, there is no investment of, well, not only in electricity, but internet connection and regular connections and so on. The list is very, very long. You mentioned it, and it's really important to point certain situations like air programs. If you listen to normal regular radio or TV, nothing happens in Venezuela. This is the best country in the world. We have, for instance, this program, produced a long time ago, Cesar Miguel Rondon. He's a journalist that has been in here a long time ago. And, he was very, critical with some reasons and really studied.
One of the most well-respected journalists in the country.
Yes, yeah. And from, one day to another, he had to, cut his program on air. So he had to move to these digital platforms to make the program. But there is a lot of people that uses internet, or it is only reduced for few people. So
yeah, the internet is not accessible to everyone. We have to keep reminding us that even though we might be in the capital and we have our own struggles with the internet, I haven't had like non-line internet access at home, and haven't had it for 6 months almost. And I literally depend on my phones to share my internet connection with my laptop and do my work. And I have to pay by the gigabyte, and it's definitely limits what I can do. But even though what I'm saying may sound like a really hard situation, especially for someone who works on the internet, about the internet, I mean, I'm still in a privileged position. Most people in the country cannot even depend on that level of connectivity for everyday life. So yeah, it's really hard out there. And if we start talking about what happened during the blackout, well, it's even worse.
Andres, and you've participated in several conferences, international conferences. How does Venezuela compare to other countries in these conferences when you have to speak about the Venezuelan situation?
Well, it's very complicated. When I started traveling and talking about the problems and the limitations on online rights in Venezuela, it was typically those concerns were lumped with the rest of Latin America. And it's like, yeah, but I mean, we're not comparable. I wish we had the problems and the policy discussions that are being discussed in Colombia or discussed in Chile or discussed in Brazil. I mean, those kinds of problems and finding solutions that are adequate for the country. I mean, those problems are miles away to what we're having. We're just talking about very serious, objective, and very targeted limitations of freedom of expression, association, and information over the internet, as well as critical failures to maintain basic communications infrastructure to the point that people can be left months without internet connection or phone, and without even an idea of when that's coming back.
Does exist an index of connectivity and more or less where Venezuela is located among the region and in Venezuela and in the world?
Well, depending on the metrics you use, you can find Venezuela at the bottom of Latin America on most metrics. It's very low globally on many metrics, and yeah, it's if you start saying about if you include metrics like freedom of expression on the internet, yeah, Venezuela is by most rankings at the bottom or near the bottom. It's listed as not free, our internet by Freedom House, and most international observatories of this show Venezuela as very censored internet.
I'm asking you this because a few days ago, the rule of law index, was published, and Venezuela is the last place.
Yeah.
Out of 133 countries, Venezuela is the 133 place. I mean, the last one.
Yeah, and that's one of the limitations to online rights, because if you're not sure that you can express yourself lawfully without repercussions, then your own freedoms are limited. And this is what happened to Luis Carlos Diaz, a very serious journalist that specifically works on topics of internet and connectivity and networks. And he was detained just because he was talking about what to do and how to stay informed, how to keep connecting with your community in the case of an internet or power shutdown or power blackout. And yeah, this happened the day before, the same day this blackout happened. And yeah, immediately, let's assume this journalist hacked the Venezuelan power grid, which, doesn't make sense. He might be
there's another reading.
But it's not a hacker.
I guess there is another reading that is the attention concerning Juan Guaido and all this. It was,
and they need a culprit. Now they're blaming Juan Guaido of the blackout as well.
Yes.
Yeah. So,
there's also electromagnetic interference and hacking and different hackings, and then also fire. It's like
they've changed their story several times. So, and that's why it's so difficult on a production level to do this podcast. Not only because of the internet connectivity, but also what are we going to talk about? Every day we have a surplus of issues that we need to talk about if we want to keep people informed that are interested about Venezuela. Because in 2 weeks, we are overflowed with information. We have the gold leaving Venezuela. We have attacks of the colectivos to people. We have the journalist situation when not only Luis Carlos Diaz, but there's a Polish journalist that was beaten by police officers here and was left in the street.
And last few days, almost every single day, and a journalist had gone missing or been detained. For then eventually people find out what happened to him, and it's really concerning. The grip is closing around us.
So
a lot of things.
So what can we tell our audience about the week ahead? What can we expect for Venezuela this week? We know that Maduro is changing his ministers, the cabinet of ministries.
We knew it not officially. We knew it through a Twitter sent
tweet.
by, who was it?
By the Vice President, Delcy Rodriguez.
Okay, she sent it. So we don't know what's going on right
Yeah.
now. All it's
All we know is that
transparent
that's-
or unclear.
Yeah.
but we'll see. We have another.
It's
lot
not
of
a surprise. Nobody's surprised because they do these cabinet changes quite often.
Well, they changed the seats, but they
Yeah.
remain the same.
They remain the same people. So it would be a surprise if we see new faces, probably trying to anticipate any sanctions, maybe.
Probably.
Maybe
Well, you'll
to,
guess some unsanctioned people will arise.
Yeah.
I don't think so.
or to,
The club of the
Yeah.
punished.
well, sometimes they reward somebody that was sentenced by the U.S. with a higher position.
with gold.
We've seen that
with
as
gold
well.
in Africa.
With gold in Africa, Uganda is investigating the gold that's been,
Turkey.
How could we say it? Taken away, robbed, stolen. How can
Exfoliated.
Yeah.
Exfoliation. That's the
Exfoliated.
word. Exfoliated.
So anyway, there's there's a lot of things to talk about. A lot of expectations this week. Do you think there will be a military intervention? That's another issue people are talking about.
I had some lines, not a full article, but that's not an easy question to talk. I mean,
No,
a lot of
it's
people
not.
talk about military intervention like it was like kind of the movie stuff, like we're used to listen from these guys. But it's not an easy question. It's not something that you have to only comment. There are a lot of studying, a lot of consequences and responsibilities under that kind of measures. But well, we have this new week. And we'll see what's going on.
The week ahead. So that is all that we have time for today. Thank you so much for coming to our podcast.
This is your house. Anytime you want. This is
Anytime.
open for you.
Thank you very much.
And if there is electricity, we'll be back with you next week.
All right. Bye-bye. Thanks.